We're at the hour. What do you think, Melody?
I suppose we could get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're really excited to have this conversation. This is Excluded, Ignored, and Doing It Anyway, Sex Workers' Rights and Philanthropy. Thank you for joining us. My name is Melody Garcia. I'm the co-director for New Moon Network. Really excited to help facilitate this conversation today with all of our great partners. Today we have a really awesome conversation, and I'm really stoked that we're getting to share this with you all. We'll do some introductions, get to know the folks on the panel, and then we'll talk about the funding for the funding landscape for sex workers' rights and what sex workers' rights looks like as a movement in philanthropy. We started a giving circle, so we'll talk about what that is and why we started it. We'll give an overview of collective giving with Sarah Lamalin, one of our guests of honor from Philanthropy Together. We'll do a grantee spotlight on one of our amazing grantees and our first recipient of the Giving Circle, Ishtar Collective with Jay Lee. And then we'll have an invitation for you all to come join us in this really amazing work. So I would love to just start with introductions. My name is Melody Garcia. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the co-director for New Moon Network. New Moon is, and we'll talk about this in a moment, but we're an intermediary and capacity building organization. And I myself identify as a sex worker. I've been doing this work a long time and have been in organizing a long time. I come from the harm reduction movement and from, thinking about systems thinking and interrupting systems of capitalism and direct services. And so my career has brought me here to New Moon Network to be of service to the mission of sex workers' rights and bodily autonomy and all of the things. It's great to be here, and I'll pass it over to my co-director and our founder, Savannah Sly.
Hi, everybody. I'm Savannah Sly. I'm calling in from Vermont today. Really excited to have all these fabulous panelists and all of you in the audience to have this discussion today. As Melody said, I'm the founder and co-director of New Moon Network. We'll talk in a little bit about what New Moon does. I also identify as a person with lived experience in the sex trade. I'm passionate about helping people take action in their local communities, which is what New Moon is all about, and also what giving circles are all about. So we'll talk about that. And just a little heads up, the chat is open. Our colleague B. Wharton is going to be dropping some links for you all as we are talking today. So feel free to click those links and get some more information on what we're talking about. And also we'll have some time at the end for Q&A. So if you could hold your questions, that would be great. I'll pass it to Sada.
Hi, everybody. It's very nice to see so many names on the chat. I am so happy to be here. My name is Sarah Lomelin. I'm the CEO of Philanthropy Together. I am based in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, originally from Mexico City, as you can tell for the accent that, it's here to stay. And very honored to be on this panel today. I met Savannah and Melody a couple of years ago, and very excited about the work that they are doing. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we'll pass it to Jay Lee.
Hey, everybody. My name is Jay Lee Brantley. My pronouns are they, them. Very happy to be here. This is super exciting. I wear a lot of hats in the movement, as I'm sure many of you do who are active in social justice. That's one thing we're very good at. Today, I'm here in my capacity with Ishtar Collective, which is a nonprofit organization in Vermont that I co-founded and co-direct currently. It is a collective organization, and yeah, I'm very happy to be here. And I also work at New Moon Network as well. So excited to have this conversation.
Yay, thank you so much. So that's us. As we stated, Savannah and I and Jaylee, of course, are with New Moon Network. Our mission is to advance the rights and welfare for people in the sex trade, and we do that through capacity building, regranting, and donor advising, among other things, right? We're community members and we're advocates, and there's a lot of different components to what we do. And I'll pass it to Savannah.
Thanks, Melody. So to break down what we do, also just want to give a heads up that we're going to be using some words today that we're going to try and give definitions for. If you're not sure what we're talking about when we say capacity building or philanthropy, we're going to try and define some of these terms, but feel free to ask questions in the chat, or we can answer them at the end during Q&A. But to break down our work into 3 different buckets, we do donor advising, which is essentially talking to foundations, individuals who want to do good things in the world with their resources and money. We talk to corporations, and we help advise them on the movement for sex workers' rights and how they can be effective in that area if they would like to see positive change for our communities through donating and being good allies. We also, this is what we're going to be mostly talking about today, is moving money into movements. As an intermediary fund, what New Moon does is we receive funding from foundations and individuals and corporations, and we redistribute that funding to our community network of grassroots organizations. Sometimes the money goes through New Moon, which makes us an intermediary, and sometimes we help broker funding through conversations that goes outside of New Moon and directly into community organizations. Any way that the money gets into our movement, we're happy. We count that as a win. We're going to be talking a little later about how much funding is available for sex worker rights and what we're doing to try and increase that funding. So that's mostly what we're going to be talking about today, but also capacity building. What is that? Capacity building is doing what we can through consultation, building and providing tools and sharing information so that grassroots leaders and individuals can be more effective in their work. So we have some educational programming. We help people learn about grant writing and budgeting and how do you get these nonprofit dollars? What does it take? So if you are a person with lived experience in the sex trade and you're involved in advocacy or community organizing or direct services, and you want to know more about how to increase your effectiveness or maybe formalize what you're doing, you can drop us a line and we would love to talk with you. So what is the movement for sex workers' rights? A lot of the people on the call today already know, because you might identify as a sex worker or a person with lived experience. And then I see a lot of allies on the call. And I also see some people from different philanthropic organizations. So just to break it down, sex work is the exchange of money or things of value for sexual or erotic services. So this could be escorting or stripping or phone sex, sugaring. There's a lot of different kinds of sex work. We don't make people identify. Also, we welcome survivors into this movement. So people who have experienced trafficking, exploitation, they are central to the movement for sex workers' rights because we believe that nobody should be forced to do this labor or any labor. On its whole, the movement for sex worker rights is an anti-violence campaign. So that's what sex work is. And then the movement for sex workers' rights is global. We'll be talking about that. But we're really going to focus on the USA. New Moon is networked with global sex worker organizations and philanthropic networks, but our work is really focused in the United States. So if we could go back to that slide, Melody, and we'll share the giving circle in a second. I know we're going a little out of order. So this is exciting. We're very excited to share that we believe that the movement for sex workers' rights in the United States has grown by 1,000% since 2015. In 2015, I was at a national sex worker organization called SWAP USA, and the board, we decided to try and count all the different sex worker groups that we could find in the United States. Amongst all of us and our contacts, we could count about 20. Maybe there were 25 or 30, but we could count about 20, and we were pretty well connected with the movement at that time. Now at New Moon, we maintain a list of 200 and plus sex worker and survivor-led organizations dedicated to sex worker rights. That's 1,000% visible movement growth in the United States in the past 8 years. And that is significant. And we could go in depth as to why this movement is accelerating. That's a different webinar, but to put it, to summarize it, essentially, there have been policies that have been passed in recent years on the federal and local level that are aimed at stopping sex trafficking, but that don't take sex workers' safety into account and that we don't feel are very effective. And so advocates are coming out of the woodwork to advocate for their safety, for their human rights, for their allegiance with survivors, and also trying to protect their communities. So we believe that that's one of the reasons that this movement has exploded in visibility in the past 8 years. Now, of the 200 plus groups that we can currently count in the United States, led by sex workers and survivors, New Moon has re-granted to 56 of them. And what we mean by re-granting is, again, we're an intermediary fund. We don't have an endowment. We're not independently wealthy. We receive funding from donors and foundations, and then we re-grant it out. So we get a grant, and then we re-grant it. So through re-granting, we've made contact with 56 of these sex worker and survivor-led organizations. And we are going to keep going because our goal is to network with this grassroots movement in the US. Now, I want to get a little bit into the leadership demographics of who is involved in these community organizations. This is really important for understanding why the movement for sex worker rights is relevant to other kinds of work we might be doing in human rights or social justice. Let's look at these leadership demographics. We surveyed our grantees and asked them a lot of questions about their work and what they do with the funding we give them. And we also asked them, who's leading your group? And this is how they responded. 95% of these groups said that they had people who identified as sex workers in leadership. 80% of them said that they had people who identified as survivors in leadership. So this clearly illustrates that either there are individuals who identify as both sex workers and survivors because they've had a continuum of experience throughout their lives, or sex workers and survivors are working together. And we know that both of these things are true through our work with these community groups. 75% of these groups identified as having trans people in leadership, and 85% identified as having Black, Indigenous, or people of color also in leadership. So this is obviously a group of leaders around the country who possess multiple identities that are affected by different kinds of cultural standards, stigmas, and practices, and also policies. And as I said, asterisk down here, this is a global movement. It's not just here in the US, but for our conversation today, we're going to focus on the US. Could we see the next slide, Melody? So here's a simple graphic to illustrate the different kinds of issues that sex worker rights are connected to. We saw that a high percentage of individuals in leadership at these grassroots organizations identified as trans or as people of color. So we see that LGBTQ plus rights and racial justice are intrinsically linked to sex workers' rights. We also know, again, a different webinar, but there's multiple issues connected to the issue of sex workers' rights. To name a couple: HIV/AIDS, reproductive rights and justice, criminal and legal reform, and of course, anti-trafficking and gender-based violence initiatives. Now, sex workers know that we are connected to all these issues. We live it every day. We see it playing out in our communities all the time. But that doesn't mean that we can necessarily access the funding we need to do our good work. Not everybody is aware that sex workers lead such deeply intersectional lives and do such intersectional work. And also not everybody's down with the cause. You know, the issue of sex work can be triggering to people. They might not know much about it, and they might not understand the value of it. So due to what we would refer to as discrimination or lack of general awareness about the intersectional relevance of sex worker-led organizations, sex workers have a hard time accessing traditional funding from foundations, individual donors, corporations, governments. All these different entities give out funding, but part of New Moon's work is to educate these entities on why sex work is relevant to different issues that might be, aligned with their values. Now, sex workers are smart and resourceful, and they know that they're going to be discriminated against. So sometimes a sex worker-led organization might downplay the fact that they are led by sex workers, and they might front with more palpable issues like describing their work as being focused on HIV/AIDS prevention, or being focused primarily on LGBTQ plus rights, racial justice, all these little bubbles here that we see connected to the issue of sex workers' rights. A lot of sex worker rights groups might describe their work as one of these larger issue areas so that they can access funding. And so for any funders who are at this webinar right now, it's good for you to know that some of your grantees might not feel comfortable describing the fullness of their work or the identity of the people leading the work because they're afraid of having doors closed on them. And when we fail to fund sex workers and the important work that they're doing in their communities, we're undermining our broader social justice movements. What's our next slide? Okay, Melody. We've said the word philanthropy a lot. What is philanthropy?
Thank you. So for the folks on the call who don't really have a good grasp of what philanthropy is, same. And I've been doing this for over a year and a half now. So philanthropy is more or less what you think of when you think of like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or Red Umbrella Fund, right? Borealis Philanthropy is another example. These are organizations that have taken either individual money from individuals with lots of wealth and resources who want to give back to their communities. And so they either create organizations or they put money into existing organizations to then disperse, similar to New Moon, right? And us as community members and as leaders of these organizations typically interact with philanthropy in a very minute and specific way, right? And that's as grant seekers. That's as folks who are on the ground doing the work, trying to get the work paid for, right? So we write a grant to Red Umbrella Fund, or we write a grant to, if you're writing grants to the Gates Foundation as a sex worker rights organization, I want to know who you are. But more often, like the Red Umbrella Fund, the Borealis, Ben and Jerry's is another one, Bush Foundation. So all of these institutions have their own sort of ways of giving back money into the community, right? And that's kind of the lowest hanging, kind of easiest to digest part of philanthropy. There are, of course, other facets of philanthropy and other types of funding to be accessed, which we'll get into a little bit later. But when we're talking about traditional philanthropy, and in this next section, how sex workers access traditional funding, we're going to be talking about largely the foundation model.
And real quick, if you want to know more about what philanthropy is or how it works or how to write grants, we have a peer leadership program that we host with our partners at Woodhull Freedom Foundation. It's called Spokes Hub. And yesterday we just had an amazing presentation on Grant Writing 101 with CJ from Third Wave Fund. And CJ really breaks down what is philanthropy, what are all the different entities in philanthropy, and how do you write these grants? And that presentation is going to be uploaded in the next couple of days to Spokes Hub. Thanks, B, for dropping that link in the chat. So keep an eye on that. And also just for any sex workers or survivors in the audience, Spokes Hub is for you. If you want to learn from your peers about how to run your organization or how to advocate, then check it out. It's a free program for you. So now we're going to take a look at the global funding landscape. And B is going to drop a link in the chat to this webpage where you can look more in depth. These are just some screenshots from the broader report. But this is 2019 data, and it's from Advancing Human Rights, the State of Global Foundation Grant Making. So this is looking at global philanthropic foundation dollars for human rights in different categories. And we know this is 2019 data, a little outdated. We're excited to announce that New Moon is contributing our grant making data from 2022 and 2023 to this project. So we're expecting an updated report pretty soon. And just something to name that is so cool about this project is they name sex workers as a key population. For any grant makers in the audience, when you put sex workers in your key demographics of people who can apply, it signals to sex workers that they can be honest, they don't need to hide their identity, or, wrap their work in other issue areas. So I really applaud this program, this website for naming sex workers. But they have other key demographics here as well. Women and girls receives 23% of global foundation funding. That's really upsetting, considering that women and girls make up at least half the population, depending on how you look at it. So the slices of the pie just get smaller from there. So LGBTQIA plus projects and endeavors get 5% of this funding. People with disabilities, 3%, and sex workers get less than 1%. And we listed all of these key demographics because all these key demographics have sex workers in them. We know that people have multiple identities, they're not living single issue lives. So this all felt important to us, but specific funding earmarked for sex worker-led initiatives, less than 1% globally. And then we look at the right side of the screen, and it shows us who are the top 10 funders for sex worker-led initiatives in 2019. We can see that there was about 7 million earmarked out of a total 4 billion of all human rights funding from traditional foundations. There was about 163 grants total. And some sad news that we have to share is that 2 out of the top 10 funders for sex worker rights, Foundation to Promote Open Society and Open Society Policy Center, which is all Open Society Foundation. They're sister organizations. Open Society Foundation went through a consolidation of its global offices in recent years. And through that consolidation, reprioritized their giving and had to withdraw from the movement for sex workers' rights. So right now, there are sex worker rights groups around the world, including in the US, who were dependent on that funding and no longer have access to it. So this 7 million might be even smaller. We'll wait for the 2023, 2022 data to come out. But this is a real hard hit to the movement globally and in the US. And it's one of the reasons that we started a giving circle. We'll get more into that in a second. And B, we'll drop a link to a report if you would like to learn more about the impact of this funding withdrawal. We're part of a group called the Sex Work Donor Collaborative. And that's a global network of groups that give money to sex workers' rights in some way. And so together, that group got together and they did a study, essentially, surveying sex worker-led groups all over the world on what the impacts are of this funding withdrawal. And if you want to learn more, you can check out that report. So Melody, can you tell us a little bit about the different kinds of pots of funding that are available in the world?
Absolutely. So we touched on this a little bit earlier, right? But to get into just a little bit more depth to tee up our conversation on giving circles. So we have this traditional philanthropy model, right, where there's a foundation that you request grants from, and that can look like a DAF or donor advised fund, individual private institutions, public foundations, et cetera. There's also corporate giving, and this is where corporations who are for profit will often have a segment of their business that's dedicated to giving back, and sometimes it's looks more like a corporate social responsibility portfolio. Sometimes it's direct donations, but there's usually always a sort of direct point of view for the grant making that speaks to the business interest of the corporation that's giving, right? And so for us, for sex worker and survivor-led organizations, a lot of our corporate funding looks like adult businesses and toy companies and things of that nature, donating directly to organizations or sponsoring folks to speak at conferences, or sponsoring other kind of advocacy as well. And then there's government grants, which are notoriously difficult to manage and to work with, especially as a sex worker-led organization. And we'll hear a little bit more about this later, but they usually operate under a reimbursement fee for service model. So these sex worker and survivor-led organizations are often doing direct services in the community that serve more than just sex workers, and are subject to all kinds of government oversight, interference, state violence, et cetera. And that pot of funding can be really, really inaccessible to our communities. And so this last pot that we're going to talk about for kind of the duration of the webinar is really this collective giving, which is a term that Sarah, you introduced to us. So thank you for that. But essentially, this is a model that we all are fairly familiar with for us who have been in this community, and who have been community organizers. This is really the movement for community care, for mutual aid, for stakeholders, allies, for anyone affected by the status of sex work in society. This is our pot of giving. So we so often are funding our own activism and our own advocacy with our other work, with our sex work, with our, side hustles. Sometimes we have other mainstream employment as well, but then we're putting that right back into the community. And this collective giving model is kind of philanthropy's answer to mutual aid. So really thinking about how to use that model of tapping into resources and community knowledge and excitement and resources that we have to really bolster our community. This is by far our biggest pot of funding. And that's what we will talk about today. So in just a moment, I'll hand it over to Sarah. I'm dying to hear anyone else but me speak. But really, collective giving for us is so important because the folks who are in it really care about the issues. We're all affected and impacted by the outcomes. With this model, the funding is community controlled because we are of and represent and are deeply embedded in our community. And we are opening the conversation to anyone, again, affected by the status of sex work in society to come join this movement with us and help direct funding. Decisions then are community accountable, and the model overall, because of all of those things, is really highly impactful. And I would love for Sarah Lomelin from Philanthropy Together to talk us through what collective giving is, what a giving circle is, and how you've been able to see other communities that are facing similar marginalization use this model to thrive.
Awesome. Thank you, Melody and Savannah. Let me see. I'm going to share my screen. Hold on. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so who are we, right? I'm going to start just by giving you a little bit of information of what Philanthropy Together is and what we do in this space. We were created with the mission to democratize and diversify philanthropy through the power of collective giving. And I know it's a lot of like lingo and, kind of institutional wording, but the whole idea is, capturing again the roots of the word philanthropy, which means love of humanity. So how do we get philanthropy back to the people? How do we support a people-powered movement instead of having just to rely on these institutional funders? So the work that we do at Philanthropy Together is basically showcase talk about this model of giving, talk about the benefits of, not waiting for someone external to come and support our communities, but by, sharing to everybody how we can do it ourselves. Scaling. So we want to start and help kickstart many giving circles across the globe to support different initiatives, and especially because, you know, as Melody and Savannah were sharing, right? If institutional funders, if corporate funders are not moving the money where the money needs to be moved, we need to do something about it, right? So that's what we do around scaling. And then strengthening and sustaining is, how do we support the existing movement? We don't want anybody to reinvent the wheel. We're here basically to support initiatives, to, you know, share resources from other groups, share best practices. So, you know, see us and you know, see us as partners in this work. A little bit about collective giving, and I know Melody spoke about it, but basically, you know, it involves a group of individuals that pool their resources, their knowledge, their networks together to support a cause collectively chosen by the group, right? Typically, it involves democratic decision making, community connections, and learning and engagement. And central to this practice, and I'm going to talk more about that, are the 5 T's: time, talent, treasure, testimony, and ties. So the whole idea of this is that, again, giving by, for, and with the communities that we all represent is, for us, the future of philanthropy. There are many ways and many different ways of doing collective giving, you know, giving circles, giving projects, flow funding circles, etc., giving days like Giving Tuesday. But today we're focusing on giving circles. And what is a giving circle? It's kind of the million-dollar question. And we love this definition from our friends at Amplifier. But it's a giving circle takes your mind, your talents, and financial ability seriously, and makes giving a collaborative social experience. And they create generous and caring communities of people who act intentionally, thoughtfully, and strategically together. And I always want to focus on those 3 words, right? Intentionality, thoughtfulness, and strategic thinking, because this is not reactive giving. Is how do we get a group of people together that are, you know, involved in learning not only about the cause, but on the, you know, the people around it, and you know, just give together. So there are 5 different things, actually 4 different things that are involved in a giving circle. First of all, you need a group, right? This is not about giving solo. Is a group with shared values that gathers and builds community and creates a sense of belonging. And then that group is going to discuss a common vision and, you know, different organizations or initiatives that are doing the work that they care about, and they engage in discourse and learning. This is not about, okay, let's get together a group of 10 friends that think exactly as us and do a giving circle. Maybe you have very different folks around the table with you in your giving circle. However, we are going to focus on the things that we have in common, not the things that, you know, makes us different. And then, you know, we will get behind a common cause. Then that group is going to decide together where the money is going to go, right? And not only their money, but also their time and their talent. And they will give with trust at the root. And this is something that I think is very, you know, important for this conversation today. We, you know, deeply believe, and the collective movement, the collective giving movement believes that we need to move from the transactional to the relationship. How do we create deep relationships, not only with the people that participate in our collective giving group, but also with the recipients of those gifts, right? Only like that is how we, you know, we really will be truthful to the word, you know, philanthropy as love of humanity. How do we create deep relationships with people? And then the most important of all, the aspects of a giving circle or collective giving is to act in abundance. So to go beyond the dollars, to really, engage with the groups that you support, for amplified impact. And this is again the 5T's conversation. How do we give our time, our talents, our testimony, or our voice and our ties? And I love this slide that our team put together, because in one slide it's like it will give you a kind of a snapshot of what being part of a giving circle feels like, right? So it's like you do a lot of learning, like you would do, in a book club, or, a group of, just learn about something different. It's teamwork, right? In a sports team, we need everybody. Everybody. This is not a solo sport. It's not a marathon. It's, a soccer game or a basketball game. We need everybody in the team. It's fun. So imagine the joy that you have when you get together with your friends. This is what collective giving at the core needs to be. We know that the issues in the world are overwhelming and they're sad and there is a lot of pain in the world, but the act of giving, and especially of giving together, should be joyful, because we have the privilege of coming together and support our communities. And then again is the impact, right? Because it's a group of people coming together, the impact will be multiplied, not only in terms of money moved, but also again in the more, two brains think better than one, five brains think better than two, etc., etc. So I'm going to, give you a little bit of background on where this whole movement came about and why it's so impactful, right? With giving circles, as Savannah and Melody mentioned, we change who is included. We're moving, the decision making from the hands of a few, millionaires and billionaires or corporations into all of us. So we're not only changing who gives, but we are changing how we give, again, moving from the transactional to the relationship. And also most important is what gets funded. I hope you got upset when Savannah was sharing those, statistics, right? That less than 1% goes to sex workers' rights. So move that, anger into action, because we cannot, keep waiting for institutional philanthropy to change. This is something that we can, take into our own hands. The giving circle model is super flexible. Like literally everybody can do it. People ask me like, but tell me like, what is the roadmap? And we always say that when you know one giving circle, one giving circle, because the model is extremely flexible. And I know Savannah and Melody are going to talk about their new giving circle, so I'm not going to say anything more about this, but everybody can do, a giving circle, and giving circles can be created by individuals or groups or families. Giving circles can be hosted by nonprofits, by philanthropic institutions, and also there are corporations that have giving circles inside to support their employees. Why we love giving circles is because, these 6 issues, and I know there's a lot of information on this slide, and these challenges that we faced, the wealth concentration, isolation, missing voices at the table of the decision-making process, anonymity, polarization, missing data, all of these challenges get attacked by giving circles. And literally, we have seen that the answer is not rocket science, it's people. It's people. It's people, regular people like all of you in this audience, that at some point said, you know what, I'm going to do something about it. And they take the initiative to do something about it. So we go from, wealth concentration to wealth abundance, from isolation to community, right? It's finding people that share our values and that share our, um, our sorry, English as a second language moment here. The word will come back to me. But from isolation to community, from missing voices to really have representative philanthropy, like the growth that the sex workers' rights organizations have had. Why is that? It's because people took the initiative to be part of the solution. From anonymity to accountability to communities, right? We need to start being more accountable to movements and more accountable to the leaders on the ground. From polarization to shared values. Again, how can we find that actually makes us similar and not different? And from missing data to aggregated impact. So collective giving is extremely powerful, right? But because there's more resources moved to Black, Indigenous, people of color organizations, leader and movements, we shift these power dynamics between givers and receivers. And why is that? Because for a lot of giving circles, especially the one that we're going to hear about, people from the community are members of the giving circle. Is how do we again take the matter into our own hands? We will move more resources to issues that are chronically underfunded, as we saw in a few slides ago. And again, shifting the mindset of who gets to be called a philanthropist. I am from Mexico. I'm a Latina. When I moved here from Mexico, a lot of people think of Latinos as recipients of philanthropy and not as philanthropists. And the same happens, with communities of color, with the LGBTQ community, with the sex workers community. Let's change that narrative and say we are the ones who can support our community. We are those leaders that we have been waiting for. A little bit of, again, my jelly bean slide with the 5 T's, right? Because when you think about giving, not only focus on the money, but think about the other things that you can give. And again, the time and the talent and the treasure, that is very easy to understand. The testimony and the tithe, which are more nuanced, are a lot of the times more important than the other three. How can you use your voice to support the organizations and the causes that you care about? How can you do advocacy? How can you elevate the messages of those organizations that you care about? And then your ties. Each of us is part of many different groups, right? You are part of your neighborhood, you're part of your family group, your colleagues, your back in the town that you used to live when you were growing up. So how can you think expansively and how can you open those different networks for the causes and organizations that you care about? I'm going to check here. Okay, it was like, okay, if I'm running late, how do
Take your time. You're doing great, Star. We have plenty of time.
Okay,
so take your
awesome.
time.
Okay, so I just want to share a little bit about this movement, right? Because the movement of collective giving is not new and it's not American. These, the concept of people banding together to create change is as old as humanity itself. And it's rooted in communities of color all across the world. So, different names in different countries, but it's basically, as Melody mentioned, right? Also mutual aid societies. Is how can we help one another without involving, this big infrastructure? But of course, in the collective giving movement in the US, as we know it, began in the early 80s. When they started, kind of doing research around it. In the last decade, it saw a tripling of circles to over 16 circles this is outdated, upon the last count that was in 2017, but I have very good news after that. So networks of giving circles with common affinities begins to form. There are about a dozen networks that exist today in the US, around women giving circles, different race and ethnicities giving circles, or, a group of Latinx giving circles, a group of Black giving circles in the South, a group of Asian Pacific Islanders. Same with, youth-led giving circles, faith-led giving circles. There are Muslim giving circles, there are Jewish giving circles, cross-race, cross-class giving circles, and specific circle models. And there are also hundreds of giving circles that get started every day. So altogether, in the past, couple of decades, research saw that there were about 1,600 giving circles that have given out about $1.3 billion as of 2016, involving about 150,000 people. The giving circles that have started in the past, last 5 years are a lot more diverse, and that is really, really exciting. So that's when, Philanthropy Together got started. For those, people that want to get into research, I know this is a lot, but we can put it in the chat. We did another research report that we just released a month ago about how, is the growth of this movement going after, 2016, because 2016 sounds like 100 years ago. So very happy to share with all of you that in the last 6 years, we moved from 1,600 to 4,000 giving circles in the US, from 150,000 people to 370,000 people involved, and have moved $3.1 billion. So again, it's this movement is not small. It's us, all regular people, taking care of our own communities. Just a slide about some of the findings of this research, right? 93% of groups are very local. Why? Because groups want to, again, members of the community are members of the circle, et cetera, et cetera. So this beautiful ecosystem of support. About 61% of participants are kind of new to collective giving, so starting the last 6 years. 84% of groups have more than half of their membership consistent of women or female identifying people. This is a very women heavy movement, and that it's the theme for another webinar. But how women give in a different way as men. Collective giving is really changing this narrative of who is considered a philanthropist. There's 50% increase in Black, Indigenous, and people of color representation in the last 4 years. Collective giving center equity when making funding decisions. And I think this is very important for this conversation, because it's not the same in, big P philanthropy and, big foundations and corporations. Collective giving is, it's really driving the giving by and for communities. So 75 of groups with a racial majority other than white focus on their funding on ethnic and racial groups. Again, the by us, for us. Here, another slide about what I was mentioning, that most giving circles are very, very local. And then the beauty of this is how members of giving circles report the impact of being part of a giving circle. The sense of belonging to a community, the confidence on taking positive action and positive change to your community, the ability to live your values. So Again, I sound like an old like a used car salesman here trying to convince you of this, but being part of a giving circles is good for your mental health and for your health. And I just want to share a few examples of giving circles, right? This giving circle, the Asian Women Giving Circle, was started in New York about 15 to 20 years ago. And they have moved a lot of money. This group of ladies, this group of women that got together and decided that they wanted to support artists in New York and social justice movements in New York. They have moved more than $1 million by each of them giving their own resources and inviting other people to donate with them. The Latino Community Foundation, based in the Bay Area, has more than 20 giving circles across California that have supported 151 Latino-led nonprofit organizations. These are organizations that have less than $1 million, and in a lot of cases, less than $500,000 in budget. So they're very small grassroots nonprofits. They have been more than 1,000 members mobilized in the last 10 years, and about $3 million moved by Circle members. Some of these Circle members are 21 years old, starting, they're in college, and people that have said it's never too early to start giving back. So again, when people say, I don't have enough money to give, everybody can be part of this movement. I'm not going to read all of this, but it's, how can we engage all of our voices? How can we practice democracy by being part of giving circles? I can share all these slides. I'll send those to Savannah and Melody so you can have it afterwards. And I think that's it for me. Yes, I will say at the end how you can get involved with all of us, but I want to leave you with this, like literally dig into your why. Why do you want to be part of an initiative like this? Lean into trust with your friends, your colleagues, your community, and be true advocates. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Sara, thank you so much for all of that. We found it to be inspiring. We've seen you talk about this before, and for people in the audience, Sara has a great TED Talk. You can go and check out. You can share it with your friends. And also Philanthropy Together is Sara's organization, and her team has worked with New Moon and inspired New Moon to start our own giving circle. We really had our work cut out for us when we started New Moon. It's like, okay, let's try and get more financial resources and other resources into the movement for sex workers' rights. As we've heard today, accessing traditional foundation funding can be challenging due to discrimination against sex workers and also not understanding our relevance to other important issues in our world. Corporate giving, same kind of doors can be closing on us. And then, government funding is incredibly complex and burdensome, and you need to have a reimbursement system, and who has the funding to do that? So as we know, sex workers have been doing it for themselves and by themselves for a long time. Due to criminalization and stigma, we're used to taking care of our own communities, and we do that through community safety initiatives, building our own communities to decrease isolation, advocating together, sharing resources, and sharing mutual aid, which can be food, clothing, shelter, and money. So sex workers have been sharing that bread for a long time, and the Giving Circle is just a formalized way of doing this. And it's also a way that our allies, our friends and family, and our clients can get involved and be in this movement with us. So we would love to show you our Giving Circle that we started on a platform called Grapevine. And real quick, shout out to Grapevine, because finding platforms that are friendly to sex worker-led causes can be really hard. We face a lot of discrimination just in accessing banking, different kinds of communication tools, and fundraising tools. So we spoke with Grapevine and said, hey, here's what we do. We're fundraising for sex workers' rights. Are we welcome here? And they said, of course you are. So hats off to Grapevine for being receptive to us. And without further ado, let's check out our Giving Circle. All right. So this is Grapevine. And Grapevine is essentially, it's like, I think of it as like a Facebook for collective giving. So this is our profile. And this is what you will see when you come to our website. Now, our goal is to raise $100,000 this year in collective giving. We've already reached about 11% of that. Every time we hit $10,000, anyone who contributed is going to nominate a group to give that $10,000 to and vote to send that money out. So we already hit our first $10,000. As of last night, we made our first grant and we made it to Ishtar Collective. And Jay Lee's going to be here to talk to us about Ishtar Collective and what they're going to do with this funding. But basically, we have a pledge scale. Giving circles can be as low as, submit $10 or it can be $10,000. As we learned from Sada, like these are incredibly flexible fundraising vehicles. This is our first time doing this. We'll put this out there. This is an experiment. We're learning a lot. And also for all of our early supporters, we are so, so thankful for all of you. Thanks for going on this journey with us as we learn how to use Grapevine and have a giving circle. But we set the minimum pledge at $100. So if you or someone you know has $100 and you want to support sex workers' rights in the US, you can sign up, you can donate here, set a different amount, and you can sign up $100 a year and you are in the giving circle. That means that you've contributed your $100. That means you can nominate groups. Again, there's more than 200 sex worker-led groups in the US. Maybe you run one, maybe you know of one, and maybe you want to nominate them to get a $10,000 grant. And then when we hit $10,000, it'll be $20,000 for our next cycle. You can nominate that group, you can vote for them, you can talk to other members of the giving circle, and you can make the case for why you think that group should get the funding. So minimum is $100. We are awfully audacious sex workers here at New Moon, and we have made a bold ask for an average pledge of $1,000. That might sound like a lot of money. For a lot of us, that is a lot of money. For some of us, we can swing it. But our theory here is that we believe that there are 100 people in the United States who are willing to donate $1,000 to the movement for sex workers' rights. And I have to admit, so we have 21 people in our giving circle so far, and we've raised this much. The average gift that people are giving is around $500. And we get $1,000 gifts, we get $100 gifts. It's all over the map. People give where they can. And this is also, I'm just going to say it again, sex workers, comrades, if you have clients who have expendable income, if they love you, if they love what they do, they're also stakeholders. They are also stigmatized. They are also criminalized. And this is a way for them to get involved in a meaningful way. They can also nominate groups. They can vote. This is a great way to get our clients involved. Quick thing, privacy is really important to us. Sada talked about all the different T's: time, talent, treasure. One is testimony. When you sign up for the giving circle, you're going to see who else has given. You don't have to use your legal name. You can use your legal name if that's your testimony. If you're like, I'm an ally to sex workers' rights, my name is Jane Smith and Jane Smith is donating, then that's great. Jane is using her testimony. But for those of us who can't be as public, you can use a pseudonym on this giving circle. Melody, I'm having a coughing fit. Can I pass it to
Yes,
you?
absolutely. So, as Savannah said, this platform is kind of our initial foray into a formal giving circle model. And what we are hoping is to get more and more folks interested in this collective giving movement, come on board with us for this experiment, try it out, and have fun, right? Like Sada pointed it out earlier in those fantastic slides. Like we want this to feel like a dinner party. We want this to feel like an exclusive group where you have access to folks who are really, really close to the issues for sex workers' rights. And we have to do this together. And so we're really excited about this vehicle. We're hoping to mostly focus on the US, but also give to the global sex worker movement to show solidarity. And we're really excited, especially about this first $10,000 that we raised, which is going out to the group that was nominated and had the most votes for this cycle. And just as a reminder, if you're part of this giving circle, you get to nominate and vote for who you want to get the $10,000 funding chunk. So please join us in doing that. I would love to, without further ado, pass it over to Jaylee Oshiro Brantley to do an introduction of themselves and of their fabulous organization, the Ishtar Collective.
Thank you so much, Melody. Oh, I just wanted to see if we could all just like maybe do a stretch and a breath with me if you're feeling it, because that was just like, I work in this and I'm like, wow. So I just had to actually write down things from Sada and things that Melody and Savannah said. So if you all want to take a minute, like take a break, take a bathroom break, whatever, no worries on it. Cause I'm just going to take a couple minutes to ease into this. It wasn't really planned, but as you all were talking, I just wanted to kind of go back to some things that I heard that just, that jumped out at me during this time. And one of the first things was like when Sada said that this is not new, right? And this is not a white model of giving. There's nothing wrong with giving as to your cultural reality, but let's acknowledge and give roses where it's due. I think I just wanted to kind of just acknowledge my people. My grandmother was from Okinawa, so I'm Uchina, and Okinawans, we have our own version of this called mo'ai. And it's a form of giving that starts when you're like a child in your community, and it can go until you're 100, right? And so I'm just going to put that little definition in there, quick and dirty, of our giving circle. And, it's just an interesting thing to think about that, like across cultures, wherever you are, we understand that we're connected to something bigger. We're connected to the people that we care about. We're connected to the people that we are in love with, that we are in family with, that we are in chosen family with. We're connected to social justice movements, even if we don't have family members or our own lived experience, we're connected to that. And so I think that this is like, I just wanted to remind us that like finding a community that gets you. I think we got some rebels on this call. Even if you're not a sex worker, I think we've got some rebels here. I think you've got some misfits. I think we've got some people that have made choices for themselves that a lot of people didn't always agree with you on it. And imagine that and like explode that times 1,000. That's the stigma that sex workers and survivors deal with. People who have had experience around violence and trafficking. So if you have experienced judgment, if you've experienced sexism, if you've experienced poverty, if you've experienced, rejection from your family for your choices, welcome. Welcome to the fam. Welcome, because we live that out every day. So that's just kind of my intro to it, that, you don't have to have experience trading sex to understand what it's like to be marginalized and treated poorly for your own lived choices. So I think at its core, it's bodily autonomy. So that's all I'm just going to say. We started with that. I'm really honored to be here for a variety of reasons. I truly love doing this work at New Moon, and supporting people with lived experience and developing their voice through our programs like Spokes Hub. And also just like, it feels so good to be giving money to my friends and to my comrades and to people I've admired for years that have been doing work that is largely funded by their own work outside of nonprofit organizations because they can't get funded, so, we are the first line of defense when it comes to exploitation in the sex industry. for all of you anti-trafficking people, I'd love for you to lean in, because there is no one better positioned to prevent human trafficking, to prevent re-trafficking, which is another issue that happens, and to prevent exploitation that's not quite on the legal definition of trafficking, but is exploitative labor. There's no one better positioned than us, than the people that are on this call and the people that are working in the industry. I think probably every sex worker or survivor on here has had a person in their life that they were like, I want to make sure that they're okay. I'm concerned that they're doing this out of a place of duress, or they've done it themselves out of duress. We have all experienced complex emotions about the labor that we've had to do under capitalism. We all know that. You got rent's coming every month, y'all. You know, if you have not been given the amount, we have all done things, whether it's like you wanted to be an artist and then instead you became a stockbroker, right? You wanted to be a person who was a dancer, but you know, instead you couldn't have access to that. And so you were cooking in a kitchen. We've all had to make choices so that we can survive. And so I just wanted to let everybody know that whether you understand it or not, if you are doing sex workers' rights, you are doing trafficking prevention. It's inherent. It's inherent. If you are trying to fight for someone's right to have freedom in their work, you are inherently doing trafficking prevention. And then many of us do overt trafficking work, anti-trafficking work, and trafficking prevention. Housing is trafficking prevention. People trade sex because they can't find food, because they have no place to sleep, right? And if you're being coerced into the sex industry because you don't have your basic needs met, you know, that's not a full spectrum of agency. And we're fighting for your rights too. So I just wanted to kind of give an overview of that, because that's really our foundational understanding of the work that we do at the Ishtar Collective in Vermont. I'm wearing my plaid here, so, you know, repping. Yep, I do have maple syrup in my iced coffee right now. You are welcome for that. It's delicious. You should try it. And I wanted to just say that, like, whatever type of work that you're doing, whether you're on the funding side or you're the grassroots side, we're locked. We're in arms, and especially around these giving models, it just levels this playing field. I'm going to pull out things that people said. Not reactive giving. I think that was you, Sada. It's not reactive giving. Whew. I'm going to tell you right now, I have been a sex worker, I have been a survivor, and a lot of things in between. And one thing that has been hard for me working in nonprofit world is asking people for money. I have no problems negotiating my boundaries and consents with sex work, but I have a really difficult time asking people for money because I grew up in poverty. And so the power dynamics have been very difficult for me to navigate. And I don't think I'm the only one in the room that's had difficult issues around money, and whether you've had it or you have not had it. So non-reactive giving, leveling the playing field. I heard strategic thinking. Those are the things that jumped out to me about what was said earlier today. The fact that we are in a place with these models that can bring us truly locked in to create better lives for people, regardless of what our skill set is and what our resources are. I love the idea that I can have equity, and I can call myself a philanthropist by giving into this giving circle, and that I have no less power than the person that is a millionaire that gave also in this giving circle. We're equal, which also means that they have equity in it too. Like that this is not about just, you know, patting us on the head and saying, please enjoy and spend your money. You know, I'm invested into their freedom just as they are with mine. And so I just wanted to flag that as well, something that I really like about the giving circle model. And I also wanted to say that, like, the way that we were able to connect with this program early on, the specific giving circle program, because New Moon also does micro grants every month that are outside of the giving circle. But this specific one was so powerful because I have had, you know, friends and family that wanted to support me, connections, clients, you know, folks that are like, they don't have financial resources, but they really are active on social media. And they're like, how can I help you? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm horrible social media, but they can plug the Giving Circle. They can be a part of your activations team. They can be a part of your team to get your folks onto this Giving Circle. So for any sex workers or survivors out here, if you have a nonprofit and you want to get involved, but you don't have the cash to do it, please hit somebody else up also to put yourself in that position to be able to donate. Yeah, it's been.
Jay, so I just want to, I think this is fundamental to Giving Circle strategy. It's like, and congratulations, Ishtar, for being our first grantee, that first $10,000. You knew about the Giving Circle early on because of your work with New Moon, and you had people in mind that you could finally tap. You had a good opportunity, and it was like $100, $1,000, whatever's good for you. We know that you care about the work that we do at Ishtar Collective, and you were able to give them a really meaningful way to participate in Ishtar's success. So what I'm hearing is essentially being an organizer, organizing your local community.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah. And then they all gave, and then you were like, okay, fam, it's time to vote. Please vote for Ishtar. And then they voted for Ishtar, and you guys got the first grant. So this is also a way where people's money can be, the power of their money can be increased. You know, somebody could give $100 or $1,000, and that might turn into a $10,000 grant. And I think that that's really cool. And I just want to, you know, hats off to you for organizing your own people to get this grant.
Well, I mean, that's what we do, right? That we're really good at mobilizing people, whether it's someone who needs like $200 to keep them in their house, right? Like they're like, rent is coming due and I don't have that money and I'm going to get kicked out. Sex workers are mobilizing around mutual aid. It is the same skill set. So please translate it to this model because you're already doing it. You're already doing this mutual aid work. And I think that it's something that I've really enjoyed about it because again, I have a hard time asking for people for money. So it's like, I know that I'm not a good traditional fundraiser in that regard. So for those of you who are not, down for that, this is for you. Yeah, Sara.
I want to say something about that because I think, asking people for money is very hard. It's very hard. And years ago, my career was not as a fundraiser. And when I started my, working as a fundraiser, I'm like, my God, how am I going to ask people for money? And someone said to me, do not take the no personally. And because when people are saying no, they are not saying no to you as a person. They are saying no to a particular, initiative, but also it may be not yet or not now. So don't get the no as definitive, like ask again. And if you change your mindset that you are not asking the money for you personally, right? For, I need this money for me, Sara, but you're asking this money for your community to support your community. And you're giving people the great opportunity and privilege to be part of your, of your initiative, that switches. And now, after I made that change in my mind, I can ask for money everywhere.
Yeah, it's a shift, right? And I think that that's like, as we're doing the work out there, we're doing the work in here. And that's what I liked about this Giving Circle. It's like the philanthropists I know want to be involved more than just sending out money and writing checks. They want to be connected. They want to be passionate. They want to be able to have bullet points. They want to be ambassadors for the movement. Right. And so that's what I got so excited about this, because I'm like, finally, something that's not just treating people like money bags, something that's getting them connected to their funding priorities and passionately engaging them, showing them how this is one of the most intersectional areas that they could give to, and getting them in that ambassador role. So going back to that, the two T's that you had, the testimony and the ties, those are the two ways too. I also feel like really people can get involved here. Is your testimony around this? Do you know of a sex worker? Do you have people who've engaged in sex work? Do you understand human trafficking is not the narrative of a white van coming up and picking up a pigtail girl on the street? That's not the majority of human trafficking happens. It happens through relationships. It happens through economic disparity. That's the meat and potatoes of where the majority of human trafficking happens in this country. And we have to get away from this this religious only notion of how people can do anti-trafficking work. It is through labor rights. It is through getting people housing. It is through getting through people agriculture, food justice. So along that, I'm going to go back into some of the things that we're doing. We've got a farm up there. We've got sex workers and survivors growing food. We're about to expand into a second farm in Vermont. We have a free open access community refrigerator where people can access that fresh produce, because guess what? Food should be for all people. Food is not a luxury. Organic food is not a luxury. It is for everyone, and it should be for everyone. So that's at the very bottom of what we're trying to do. We're trying to get people food and shelter and healthcare. And then we're going to work on these macro systems like the policing and the policy work. But lately we've been shifting to direct services because that's what the community needed. And we listened to our community. We started off as a policy organization, and that was January 2020. 2 months later, yes, we pivoted hard like everybody else did, because we had community members that were getting unhoused. They were getting, evicted. We had people who didn't have food because they couldn't physically go. We're in rural Vermont. They couldn't physically access any groceries. So that's how the stuff comes about, is that you look at the needs of your community and you say, I'm going to respond. I'm going to do what I can. And you start building community members to support that vision as well. Yeah, Savannah.
Yay, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about briefly about the trajectory of Ishtar. I have to admit, as somebody who grew up in Vermont, when I moved back to Vermont from Seattle and saw that there was a local sex worker collective, my heart sang, and I'm like, oh my goodness, they're like, my people are here. So it was a real homecoming, and it's been fascinating to watch Ishtar's work, especially through the pandemic, responding to the need, showing that sex workers are community-minded largely, and serving people who are not just sex workers, but the broader community. Ishtar started as a really small group with hardly any funding. And I was wondering if you could talking about the T of ties, and testimony. When a group like New Moon identifies a group like Ishtar Collective and gives them a $1,000 micro grant, gives them seed funding at $1,000 a month or something like that. Can you talk a little bit about how that investment can help enhance the work that's being done at a group like Ishtar?
Absolutely. So along that ties bind kind of situation, there's something for some people know, and if you have ever worked in a very niche thing, but in filmmaking, there's something called packaging, which is the idea that something small you can package with something else, and you can package with something else. And that package is greater than the sum of its parts. And then you can leverage. And whether this is in business or finance, this is what happens in funding. So for us, that tiny little $1,000 grant created opportunities for other funders to see that we were trustworthy, that we did good work with this tiny little grant that ended up actually being tremendously impactful because it went so far. $1,000 in our community goes way farther than it does in other communities because we're overwhelmingly volunteer led. So, we're out there making sure that people can stay in their homes, getting them food, getting them clothing, shelter, these kinds of things, a motel overnight to escape a trafficking situation. So $200 to you may not be a lot, but it could mean the difference between someone staying in a trafficking situation and having a safe space to land that night. So that packaging, this idea of starting small and smaller amounts, actually shows and is an indicator to other funders that you are ready for larger amounts. And so that's what happened. And then New Moon gave us seed funding as well, because they saw that we did so well with that $1,000. And, so it moves from that point. And I really encourage people who are trying to figure out early on, like, how do we leverage this? It is about building. Please know that this is a long game, right? Like in the same way that this is not reactive giving, this is kind of a long game. We're asking people to invest into our organizations and watch them grow over time, because we don't have the institutional funding or infrastructure to just come out hot, to have a $50,000 budget, to have a $200,000 budget that a lot of people can open up their nonprofits with. Most of us are fiscally sponsored, which means that we're small projects within a larger one, right? So we have to build, and I think that's something really important to recognize. And some of the funding arc that we've been through as far as like building over time. And, there was a time that we didn't have fiscal sponsorship, and that was very difficult, right? So we're working within a nonprofit model, a 501c3 model. If you don't have a fiscal sponsorship, please consider it, because it is something that can really help you grow and make sure your communities have more access to funding sources, through the grant modality. So some things that I wanted to name, and I know we're running out, so I want to make sure we have a lot of time for questions, but challenges that we've had with grants, I wanted to flag this. We are an anti-trafficking organization explicitly, right? We are actively fighting against trafficking and doing trafficking prevention from some of the ways that I mentioned before. One of the things that is very difficult for people to understand is that sex workers who are doing active anti-trafficking work have unbelievably low amounts of funding in the anti-trafficking world. Next to nothing. For a variety of reasons, we can do another webinar on. Look up something called the Anti-Prostitution Pledge and be prepared to choke on your food. Something horribly unconstitutional. But we are largely left out of these anti-trafficking funding streams that are usually federal, state, or local grants. And I'm talking $600,000, $1 million to just like build a house or help people with their healthcare. We are left out of that largely. And so we don't have access to those funding streams. And Melody mentioned it before. They are notoriously racist. They are notoriously sexist. They are notoriously like completely elitist in their models because of this reimbursement model, the reimbursement style of grants. And I love that you had that earlier on your slide. Grants in quote. Grants is not really what it is. It's an award, but you have to spend the money first to get the money back. So if you're doing something and you get like a $500,000 grant, that means that you're spending between $40,000 and $70,000 per month. And you won't get reimbursed for like 3, 4, 5 months, right? So grassroots organizations don't have like $200,000 just sitting in their bank account that they can just, do expenditures on their programming. We don't have that. So we don't even apply for that funding. We don't even have access to it. And then when we do, we have like a little hair up our ass. We're like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for that federal funding. We overwhelmingly get discriminated against because we believe that sex workers have a right to exist and to work with dignity. And that's horrific that we don't even get those options. So I just wanted to let people understand the little nitty gritty of like, even these funding streams that claim that we could actually have access to that are larger in size, we don't traditionally have access to them because of the stigma around sex work. So it's so important for funders like New Moon to act as springboards for us to be able to build upon other funding models. And this is a concrete example of that. And so anyway, the impact of Giving Circles is, as already been mentioned, powerful. And I'm gonna tell you, it's flexible. So we don't have to report. For those of you who are in philanthropy, you understand that you have your own funding priorities. You want to make sure that they're spending their money correctly, right? But that is a form of parentalism on folks that understand how to give their monies. It's not always, but it's overwhelmingly. When you are making people report in a way that is unnecessary or extra data or extra demographics, the administrative time it takes to that is really it's really hard for organizations that are doing volunteer-based work. So I just wanted to put that in there for philanthropy. Look at what you actually need in your data and ask that question. But all the extraneous stuff, you are asking people to put in extra hours and hours and hours on reporting that you may not ever use and ever need. And you're not asking always targeted questions that you could be. So these giving circles have impact that's flexible. There's no reporting in them involved, and you can do mutual aid. Why is that important? Because sometimes we serve people who are undocumented that need to have money in their pocket. So if we don't get their W-9 form in traditional philanthropy, we can't get that funding out. So people can't have a place to stay. You understand? So having these flexible modes where flexible funding, reporting, flexible funding is really important when it comes to reporting, because at the end of the day, our communities know how to spend this money. We've been doing it before. We've been spending our money before. So there has to be trust at the bottom. And I think that's what Giving Circles do. They provide a level of trust to let you know that you know how to do your work, and we're entering into a relationship with you. So if there's something fishy, we're going to go into a relationship on how you spend your money. But overwhelmingly, these organizations have been self-funding for so many years that it's like, we don't need these traditional kind of oppressive systems of reporting.
Jaylee, thanks for sharing all that and telling us about the arc of Ishtar and the importance of the work it's doing and the complexity. You know, it's like you're working in so many different areas, but it's sex worker and survivor led. And that's what we're here to do at New Moon is identify these groups and help them succeed. So you can join our giving circle and we hope you do. We will be following up with you after this webinar to hopefully garner your interest in supporting this. We want to hit that $20,000 mark and we want for you to nominate and vote on groups to get these grants. But also, we went over a lot of jargon today. There's a lot of sex workers and survivors on the call. I know there are. Melody, if we could stop the slides and just look at each other, that'd be great. So something we do at New Moon is we offer technical assistance. So if you are like, that was a great webinar, but I didn't quite understand this part, or Jay Lee laid out a lot of knowledge and I want to go deeper into it, contact us. B, if you could drop our email address in the chat, we would love to help talk with you about fiscal sponsorship, budgeting. You got a government grant. We want to know about it. Let's help you with that reporting. We offer zero interest loans sometimes at New Moon to help you with that reimbursement model. We want your groups to succeed and we want your groups to launch and open doors so you can get the funding you actually deserve. So reach out to us for technical assistance. We also offer micro grants. So I just dropped a link for the New Moon Fund, which is one of our programs. Yes, we have this giving circle. We give out $10,000 grants a couple of times through that. But every month we give out five, count them five, $1,000 grants, unrestricted, flexible funding to sex worker and survivor-led groups. The only caveat is that you need to be fiscally sponsored or have a 501c3. If you don't know what that means, reach out and we'll explain it to you. But you need to be nonprofit affiliated. And lastly, this is all so much information, and we know that a single webinar is not going to cover it all. So B is going to drop a link in the chat to Spokes Hub. Spokes Hub is our virtual peer learning academy for people with lived experience in the sex trade. If you want to learn about grant writing, how to talk to the media, how to write an op-ed, what is the experience of trans sex workers? What's it like to be a Black sex worker? What's it like to be a sex worker in a rural area? If you want to learn all these things from your peer or even teach a class, please come check us out at Spokes Hub. We would love to get involved because we know it takes more than money to move our movement, you know, but money's a big part of it. But also knowledge, networking, technical assistance. That's what we're here to do at New Moon. We have a couple of minutes for Q&A. If anybody has a question, drop it in the chat.
And in the meantime, Sarah, is there anything that you would like to announce or have this audience hear from you before we close out?
No, just, you know, thank you all for having me. I will be sending the slides to Savannah and Melody so they can share with everybody. And my email is there. Our website, I think, was shared in the chat, philanthropytogether.org. All the programs that we have there are free. So, you know, join us. We have an equity and justice in collective giving series going on. We also just hosted the We Give Summit. And at the We Give Summit website, I'll put it in the chat. We have, there are about 150 hours of content there about many other things around collective giving if you want to learn more. And yeah, thank you so much for having me.
We love interfacing with you, Sara. You are one of our favorite people to meet in philanthropy. And I just noticed that we have a question in the chat from Myra. Myra asks, what is the general difference between a giving circle and cooperative models? Does anybody have any thought on that?
I mean, very good question, Myra. And actually, you know, a giving circle, because you basically create your own rules, the rules that fit your circle, can be a cooperative giving model. So there are many circles that pull funding to give to other initiatives. There are giving circles that are part mutual aid society or a co-op. Then you know, half of the money stays with the circle, half of the money goes out. So that is the, you know, the beauty of the collective giving you know, model, is that you can do literally whatever you want. It's whatever will fit your group.
And so we can do whatever we want with our giving circle. So please join and please contribute if you have articles or things that you find interesting post it to the Grapevine. Connect with us on Grapevine to schedule a coffee hour, or email us and make sure that you make the giving circle what you want, right? Again, I love that visualization of kind of the dinner party, where we're talking and we're sharing and we're learning together. Jay Lee, to close us out.
Two things. Gonna brag on New Moon. We just won a web award for a directory that we made, and it was made all by sex workers and survivors. And I'm putting it in the chat. It's called airdirectory.org. And this is an amazing resource if you want to get nerdy and learn about all of these things that we're talking about. There's almost, I think, 500 resources on there, as well as grant opportunities. And if you have a resource, please submit it to us. But this won a web award for advocacy, and we're really proud of it. This is another resource. If Spokes Hub is the university, this is the library, as Savannah says. And the last thing I wanted to say is just a big thank you that this exists. So a thank you from New Moon. A thank you for supporting this, for molding it and changing it. And this grant's going to go some great causes, specifically around our food justice program and our housing justice program, and specifically. So I just wanted to let you know what we're going to do with it. We're going to try to keep people in their houses, and we're going to get them some food. So.
Yay. Amazing. Thanks so much, Jay. Thanks so much, Sara, for joining us. We're so grateful to you all for being here. We'll be able to send out slides and the link to the recorded video as well. Thank you all so much.
Take care. Thank you all.